What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mind Muscle Mission podcast on the NFM Podcast Network. My name is Ben, the co-host, and this clean-looking individual is my host as well. Christian, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm alive and breathing. I like to say that every day. So I'm walking on the dirt instead of under it. So it's a good day. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah,
Honestly.
man, you got a new backdrop. Did
Yeah.
you change or what do you do there?
I moved about 3 feet from the chair over to the desk, and I was like, you know what? This wall's looking really plain. So I decided to actually do stuff on it. So
Nice. Well, it
lights.
looks good. I like the ambiance. It's really
Gotta gotta make it moody. Moody for the people.
I guess so, yeah. I'm just on a plain black white screen at a brand new house with very little furniture. So I'm living the life, the minimalist life right now. But hey, we just want to introduce Commander Yates, United States Navy, to this podcast. Sir, how's it going? Thank you for joining, and we appreciate your time.
Hey, going well, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, I think it. So we'll dive down into a little bit of what you're doing and what you did. Um, but reading the questionnaire, and this is something that Christian and I always like to ask is what caused you to join the armed services, and your story is something different than most people, right? Most people are is like, yeah, I was doing this, but I didn't like it. I want to do something better. I wanted to see my true, potential. I wanted to reach travel the world. But yours is something unique, like authentic, like real. So you can tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like you said, people join the military for different reasons, and I early on in my career, I used to ask, like, why did you want to be a naval officer? Why did you want to join? And I got a myriad of different responses, and almost shockingly to me, almost none of them were like mine. My parents both were in the Navy growing up. Um, I had older parents. Like my dad retired from the Navy in 1989, I think, after 30 years. But he fought in Vietnam. I believe he did 7 tours overseas in Vietnam, primarily flying combat search and rescue in a helicopter. So he retired in 89. I was a few years old, and I just kind of grew up with this retired dad and my little brother on a farm. I knew he didn't go to work, and that was pretty cool to me. And then, uh, kind of he just he watched a lot of TV, and I kind of grew up watching Victory at Sea, that old World War II series in black and white, watching naval battles, and then I found out that he was a helicopter pilot. He didn't talk a lot about Vietnam, but I just kind of grew up wanting to join the Navy, be a helicopter pilot, go fight for freedom and democracy around the world. Um, and I kind of assumed that everybody had that mentality going into it. And I guess I also wasn't very forthcoming with that information. I tried to enlist at a high school in the Navy. Recruiter called my dad, and he said, under no circumstance you join the Navy, and I'm not going to sign anything that says you can. And I told him straight out, well, that's cool, Dad. I'm just going to wait till I turn 18, then you don't have to sign anything. And at that point, he said, whoa, let's slow down here. We had a long talk about, naval service. He still tried to talk me out of it, and he said, hey, why don't you call your mom? And she is a retired Navy captain as well. She tried to talk me out of it. And then once it became clear, like this was happening either way, and I was again shocked that all throughout growing up, I like to hunt and camp, and I build models like a teenager in the 50s of naval aircraft, and all we did was watch Navy shows and history shows and that kind of thing. I was shocked that this wasn't an assumption on my parents' part. But long story short, I did apply for the NROTC scholarship, got a full ride scholarship to the University of Missouri, which was really convenient for me because that's where I kind of grew up, in Columbia, Missouri. And 4 years later, got a commission and went off to the Navy. And that was 18 and a half years ago.
Nice wrapping up. That sounds like, yeah, I'm surprised to hear that he said, like, no, don't join the Navy. You figure that it's like, if you're going to join anything, go to the Navy, if anything.
He eventually said, when I was going through the ROTC, there's an option you can switch between the Navy and the Marine Corps. He said, if I had to go back and do it again, I would have joined the Marine Corps. I thought it'd be neat to, fly Cobras or do some, more aggressive and advanced flying. I said no, but he he noted like you go out and you shoot all the time and you like to hunt and camp. Like that's more up your alley than staying on a big gray boat and flying ashore.
Yeah. So
But I was
what
no, I was
was
18 and I knew everything, so I didn't listen to him.
Of course.
we always knew
Yeah.
everything at 18. What was your, like, looking back on it, right? You could have enlisted, but you ended up going the officer route or OTC route through college. Um, for people who are for listening and whatnot, is there what was your decision to sacrifice 4 years? If this is something that you knew you wanted to do to go, go to OCS or and go that route versus the enlisted route.
Legitimately, it was my dad. He told me at some point, which was kind of my convincing factor, and said, I've never made you do anything in your entire life, but if you're going to join in the Navy, I'm going to make you go to college. And if you're going to go to college, you better get a scholarship because I can't pay for it. There's a lot of tension there,
Yeah.
financial. Ultimately, when you're that young, 17, 18, you don't really know how the military works. And he had to walk me through, well, you can't be a pilot if you enlist. My dad had enlisted in 1958, and he got out of the Navy briefly and went to Auburn, I think it was. And then the way he put it was, once football season ended, I didn't know why I was in school anymore. So then he went back to the Navy under a program called Aviation Officer Candidate School, which no longer exists. But you didn't used to need a degree to be an officer
Okay.
or be a pilot in the Navy. So once he got that through my head, if I want to fly helicopters and do search and rescue, that's the only way to do it.
When you knew early on that was your job, like you wanted to fly.
Absolutely. I don't know how to describe
Awesome.
it other than, there was never, I've always remembered this thought and this feeling. I had, you can look back at like old school projects from fifth grade and it's like, what do you want to do in life? And it was, I want to be a lieutenant in the Navy and go fly helicopters. So again, I'm so confused as to why this was a shock to my parents. It was written, it's like written on my forehead.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we jump into the military career, how was it? You said your dad didn't really talk much about Vietnam, and I think that's a commonality, right? And I think Vietnam vets have had a hard time, right? Now, in the mental health regard and in the space, uh, the GWAT vets have a lot more resources available to them. Has your dad ever opened up? And if so, like, did you see that relief on his face of just finally being able to talk to somebody about uh, the chaos that Vietnam was?
Dad used to take me to the VFW when I was of age and go drink with some of the old timers. And that was a lot of fun. And he still really wouldn't talk about Vietnam. I don't think he really opened up about it until I left for the Navy and I came back a helicopter pilot on leave. And he would, tell some vignettes or funny stories, or we'd have a few back at the house, and he would really open up about it. But he really didn't talk much. And I think that's a generational thing. But you're right; they were provided a lot of resources that we are today. And I believe it wasn't even diagnosed as PTSD at the time when folks would come out of country and return to the U.S. Yeah, he didn't really open up until later, and a lot more after my first deployment too. I'd been to a
Yeah.
lot of the same areas, barring Vietnam that he had been in. But I'll also say, he passed away in 2016.
Sorry to hear that.
That, yeah, me too. But he was opening up a lot towards the end. I think he wanted to get some stories out, and then kind of an amazing thing to me was, we're in the ICU, and he's kind of on his deathbed, really, so to speak, in a medically induced coma. And I don't know how the cat got out of the bag, but somehow his old like Vietnam friends, prior pilots and crewmen, figured out the ICU desk phone, and it was just ringing off the hook with people my dad hasn't spoken to in 40 years. Old combat vets crying on the phone, telling me what a great guy he was, and that was very meaningful for me, and the relationships you can form in the military. But sure would have been nice for that phone to be quiet for a while. But
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah,
Well, it's a
You
true
know,
testimony
he's
of who your father was. Um,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
think that's a great thing. I'm sure you're very proud. So that's awesome. Um, so yeah, so that's yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic, I think, and a lot of Vietnam vets. It's just a different time. Different. It was different back then, and it's different now. There's so many relatable components. It just I just don't know how to say it otherwise, other than it's just different. It was. So off you went, right? You graduated college, and off you went to learn how to fly helicopters. What And then you were talking you were stationed out in San Diego, right?
Yeah, correct. So the way that ROTC works is you don't, you have 4 years of varied training throughout college. There are classes you have to take, and then there's, once a week you have kind of a lab where you get general military training and other briefs, and then you have PT throughout the physical training throughout the week. But this commissioning program, when you graduate on a Friday, right? Saturday morning is commissioning. You're a naval officer. There's no follow-on OCS. You just wait to go off to what you're going to do in the Navy. And for me, I think about 2 weeks later, maybe less, I was PCS down in Pensacola, Florida, and waiting flight training.
Okay.
So not to get too deep into flight training, but everybody starts flying fixed wing. At the time I went through, primary was in the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor. And you do a number of flight events, and then the Navy looks at what you want to do. Kind of your wish list or your dream sheet. They look at your grades, how well you did, and then they look at the needs of the Navy, what's available, and then they match those three things up, and then hopefully you got what you wanted, whether that be tailhook jets, multi-engine, or helicopters. I wanted helicopters, and I got it, and so I went kind of the helicopter route from there. That training is near Pensacola, at a place called Whiting Field in Milton, Florida.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
And
that place.
yeah, love it. If anybody's listening, I love you, Milton. I miss it down there. But I did the helicopter syllabus over there. You finally you finish up the training and you get your wings and you're off to the fleet to go learn your first kind of gray aircraft for the Navy. And that first duty station for me was San Diego, California.
So right from the beach to the beach, that had to be.
Hey,
That's
brother, it's tough. We have a lot of tough duty stations in the Navy between
gosh, I
Pensacola
know.
and San Diego, Virginia Beach.
It's just too hard, compared to beautiful Fort Riley. It's middle of
So
nowhere.
you bring that up, right? So my first deployment was all over kind of 7th Fleet, the Asiatic Seas, and then 5th Fleet. And my brother at that time, my brother was an 88 Mike in the Army, and by the time I went on my first deployment, he was an intelligence officer stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas, with 4 Cav, I believe. But I would, there's a significant time difference between Japan and Kansas. And the first thing I would do when I got off the boat was I'd get service and I'd call him. And eventually he calls me back and says, like, hey, you got to stop calling me at work. And I said, why? He goes, every time you call, you're on a train in Busan, or you're in Phuket, Thailand, or you're having an awesome time in Japan. He's like, my unit just got back from Afghanistan, and they straight up did not have a good time. So everybody's getting kind of pissy that they joined the Army and they're not stationed at the beach or hanging out at the beach or whatever. And then eventually, I remember this distinctly. We get off the phone and he just goes, "Hey, Chris, war is hell." And I was like, "Yeah, see you next time. Bye."
Yeah.
And at that time, he's saying war is hell, and you're hearing the in
Yeah,
the background from the
yeah, yeah.
short call
Beating the
from the
beat
back.
back. Yeah,
Oh yeah. So yeah, man, this is tough. I don't know. I might have to get one drink instead of two tonight. It's gonna be a difficult
yeah,
one. Not too sure.
yeah. Get responsibilities later.
Yeah, but yeah, it's and that was so. I know you're saying like that helicopters were like the main thing. Was there a specific aircraft that you wanted to fly? I know you're saying it was Sea Stallions. You were saying you're on, right? That was like the main.
So,
That was the main.
so, and this is bad on me, and I don't recommend this route, but I kind of trusted, like I knew I wanted to be in the Navy and fly helicopters, and I trusted whatever they were going to give me was going to be fine. I I wanted to fly 60 Sierras because everybody else seemed to want to fly 60 Sierras, and I lucked out that just happens to be the primary search and rescue helicopter for the Navy. And then when it was time for duty station location, I wanted San Diego because everybody else seemed to want San Diego, and I'd been there before. And I lucked out there too. And I was part of a great squadron, Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 6. I really no regrets from letting the Navy choose for me. And again, I don't recommend that course of action. Do your research. If there's a platform or a job you want, you should absolutely do the research. I was just happy to be there.
Well,
How
honestly, yeah,
long
you're
were
lucky
you
with
in
that.
San Diego for?
I was in San Diego for about 5 years. That's where my fleet replacement squadron was. That's where you learn to fly like your helicopter for the first time. I was med down there for a bit, so I had an extension. And then I got to my first fleet squadron also in San Diego, and that's about 3 years. So it ended up being about 5 total.
How
Where'd
is
you head to
it?
after? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Christian. You're good.
I was about to say, I was gonna follow up and say where'd you head after that, but I think we can answer that after what you were saying, Ben.
I was just gonna say, how was it the first time when the wheels lifted off? Like, was it? I know you do probably simulation and a lot of training and whatnot, but what was that feeling like when you first lifted off and it was your aircraft that you were flying?
So in a helicopter, you have 2 pilots, right? You're never really alone. And throughout your training, you've got somebody next to you that legitimately knows what they're doing, if it's not you. But I'll say in fixed wing training is the first time they allow you to solo, like, go up by yourself in an aircraft in primary. And that's the first time, it's hard to describe. There's a lot of trust you place in your instructor, obviously, because they're qualified and they've been doing it for a long time. They know what they're doing. And then at some point, you have a check ride that shows your instructor, hey, I can do this by myself with no help. And then immediately following that check ride is your first solo. And then you start hearing things you never heard before. And you're like, well, does it always sound like that? Or is the engine? I'm sure it's good, but you're afraid to call back to anybody because you don't want to look like an idiot. And then you get wheels up, you're flying around your course rules, and then it's time to come back home and land, and you're like, man, am I good at this? I kind of got one shot to land here. I hope this works out. And anyway, it's big confidence builders. What the solos are really for, and you have a number of solos in primary flight training, but then kind of from then on, you're with another pilot in helicopter land.
That's not bad. I think one of my favorite things I've heard is, if you didn't land properly, it's not going to be your problem afterwards.
Yeah.
If you land great, if you do great, then hey, you did great. If you didn't, it's not your problem anymore.
Well, I remember asking my dad one time, this is well before the Navy, like, what do you do in a helicopter if the engines die? And it's similar to, parachuting. Dad just said, well, you've got the rest of your life to figure it out.
That's a good,
Yeah.
It's
that's
good.
definitely a good like Vietnam saying right there too, honestly.
Yeah. But I mean, the real answer is obviously you auto rotate and do a landing. But yeah, it's funny.
Also,
When
okay,
we're
so so how long were you flying for, and how long have you been desk side in the best way of saying it?
desk side, flying a desk. So I flew my first tour for about 5 years in San Diego. My next tour after that, I returned to Pensacola, actually to Whiting Field, and I was a flight instructor teaching helicopter flight school, and that was far and wide my favorite tour, probably at least one of the favorites. Very rewarding, and you're still in the aircraft. So that was another probably 2.5 years. From there, I went to the East Coast to Naval Base Norfolk, and I was ship's company there. And ship's company means I'm part of the ship's crew. I'm not in a flying capacity, but that was a pretty short tour for me, maybe 14 or 15 months due to timing issues. And then I returned to flying again for another 3 years in Norfolk, flying the 60 Sierra with Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 5. And then after that, I went to the joint. That's when my kind of aircraft time ended. My last flight was, I don't even know if I want to say this out loud, October of 20, back in the COVID years. But so then after that, I went to the joint staff and worked for the chairman, so to speak, for about 3 years, and then I got picked up for my current tour at Navy Talent Acquisition Group Nashville. So it's been a hot minute, but I'm still designated a naval aviator. If the Navy was an extremist, they could pull me out of here and throw me back in a cockpit, and I'm confident I could be a mediocre pilot once again.
Is that a option?
Uh,
Are you going back to flight? Like, I know you probably lost flight status, but you're still a designator, or do you still have flight status?
So I still have a flight status. I'm just not in a flying billet right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is a possibility I could go back. It'd have to be I'd really have to thread the needle for another flying job after this, but those are usually reserved for folks who picked up a command tour at a squadron that kind of keep moving up the ranks there.
And when they told you were moving into, just to dumb it down, recruiting, what was your like kind of initial reaction? Because I can imagine that's a little bit of a, oh well, crap, I'm no longer fleet side. I'm just interacting more or less with the civilian populace on a day-to-day basis. I mean, how was that kind of reaction and movement?
Oh man, that's a personal question. Yeah, so I'll tell you this. I was certainly butthurt for about 15 seconds, right? The command slate comes out, and I was honestly really hoping to go back to an orange and white training squadron. I really loved it down in Pensacola and working with students and watching the light bulbs come on. But when I didn't make any aviation, it hurts your pride a little bit. And what helped me, honestly, was I saw the list of my friends and peers and colleagues that did make it. My year group, the folks that I know and I fly with. And I don't want to have said this out loud, but I go down the list and I think to myself, like, yep, I would have picked him. I would have picked him over me too. Yeah, that guy's a great pilot. I don't know about that one. But yeah, this good dude, good dude, good dude. And when you look at your competition and you know them personally, and it's like, yeah, no, I think the Navy got it right. I would have picked these folks as well. So that took the sting off. And then, I called one of my old mentors, call sign Broadway, and I said, hey, I got picked up for these orders to a recruiting region. And I knew he'd had experience with that. And I just said, what do you think? And the words that came out of his mouth were, hey, you might be upset right now about not getting operational, but every sailor deserves a good CO, not just the guys and gals that are deploying. And that really, if that's what you're about, being a leader and more of a mentor and if you care about people, then it doesn't matter where you go. You just have to go there and help people. And so recruiting is this entirely different job that I never considered, never saw myself in, but it's been very eye-opening on how we do business on this side of the house. And honestly, I think the fleet, meaning the operational forces, there's such a gap in knowledge on the recruiting, from there to the recruiting side, that I personally think that the fleet needs more kind of insight into what we need, what we do, and how we do it.
Yeah, they just get all that through TikTok and Instagram nowadays with everybody on their cell phones and social media.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's true. How long have you been at the center that you're at right now?
I've been here for 17 months. Next month will be 18, and that'll be change of command, and then I'll fleet up, so to speak, and become the commanding officer. Knock on wood.
Yes. Okay. So you're staying there. How long's that uh, tour, I guess you could say, here in Nashville? Are you going to
So
retire
the
out of this
XO,
position, or yeah, what's the
big,
trajectory?
hard-hitting questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the XO tour is about 18 months. The CO tour is about 18 months. And so
Okay.
just how my timing works out, that will take me almost exactly to 20. Insofar
How
as career
convenient.
intentions, yeah, it will convenient at the surface level, but then it's really when you've got all the cards on the table. I could go back or stay in, or try to go something operational and take a staff tour in DC, or I could retire. It's actually a lot more confusing. I can tell you what the family would like me to do is retire. We're probably leaning towards that direction, but I'm certainly not closing any doors for myself or dropping any paperwork at this time.
Yeah,
I'd say
absolutely.
probably just depends on if you pin 6 too. In the meantime.
I mean, if they want to, yeah, it's a consideration.
It's a dangle. So before you before you headed to Nashville, and you were flying search and rescue, was most of your operations overseas, or were you doing flying operations here locally as well for search and rescue?
So, yeah, most operations overseas, right?
Yeah.
Stateside, you train to do all of the mission sets that you could possibly do or be called upon to do, so that you're trained and qualified. And you never want to be in a position where you're having to do 9 lines overseas, but if the Marines call you, you need to be able to do it. And then
Hmm.
when you go on deployment, we are the primary search and rescue platform. We also do it's called VertRep, or vertical replenishment. That's when you see pictures or videos of helicopters flying these big nets filled with supplies from one ship to another. That's resupplying the fleet. But yeah, we train to do a lot of sexy stuff, and then you go on deployment. It's mostly passengers, mail, cargo, and search and rescue support. Um, but still important, right? And the
Yeah.
other matter of it is, when the air wing, the pointy nose guys, the fast movers, the jets take off from the carrier, they can't do that unless there's a search and rescue asset on site. So the helicopters are first off deck, and we're essentially waiting for something bad to happen. Happy when it doesn't, and then we can secure from flight operations when the air wing's back aboard. Um,
Yes.
and then stateside, I've done a lot of hurricane evacuations. That is to get our aircraft out of a location. Um, Not much search and rescue stateside. A lot of that is the Coast Guard's helicopter mission, and then we also have, it's called Station SAR, like actual search and rescue stations for hazardous areas that actual squadrons are assigned to that job. Um, there's one in Whidbey Island, there's one in Key West. Places where people get themselves in trouble and they need a rescue, whether that be
Yeah.
a drunken boater or a lost hiker. The Navy takes care of that as well.
Well,
Yeah.
those you just described the Marine Corps at once too, right there. A drunken boater, or a lost hiker. It's one of the you're doing the same thing.
Christian,
Same
if
thing.
you keep at it, you'll get a rescue at some point. You'll get picked up, I promise.
Maybe I want just hey free helicopter ride. I'm good for it.
that's the way you got to
Let's
go
go.
about it.
Did you all have anything to? Because if I remember correctly, the Navy was one of the first into the hurricane. Was it Helene, the one that wiped out Asheville and basically the whole Appalachia?
Yeah, I
I
was
think
here in
the
Nashville
Navy.
for that. I think if I recall correctly, the Navy was up there pretty quick. They sorted a bunch of assets from Norfolk, and it's a pretty quick flight over there. I don't know how quickly that was taken over by local authorities. I can tell you when I was on the Kearsarge on the East Coast, a ship's company, there were those 3 hurricanes that hit in pretty quick succession. First one was Harvey in Texas. The Navy, they flew a ton of assets down. I think that was 2017. Navy flew a ton of the assets down there, and they were getting dozens of rescues a day, getting people off their roofs and stuff. And then that mission ended pretty quickly. But then can never remember the next hurricane that hit kind of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, but didn't do a ton of damage. But then there was another one like a week or two later, and I think that was Irma that really was really destructive. And we were already on station because we had already sorted for Harvey and the follow-on hurricane. I apologize, I can't remember the name, but
Yeah, I remember that. I
Just
think that's
kept
the
they
one that
just
where
kept coming.
yeah,
yeah. I think that's the one that kind of like sunk us. Like so a few of those smaller islands, they're like a foot underwater the entire.
oh yeah,
Which is
it must have been. There were 3 hurricanes in that area, like quick succession.
I can imagine. Well, when you were saying it was kind of cool when when you're saying that an air search and rescue asset has to be on when a jet's flying. I was like, man, those guys must kind of be busy too right now with everybody dropping F-18s into the water constantly.
It's not everybody, I don't think, but yeah,
It's just
I read that same report from earlier in the week. That's a bad day for everybody involved, obviously.
yeah.
But
Apparently
happy
they just
that
dropped another one like a few hours ago. Another one just
yeah, it was
yeah
it
just
was
lost.
yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Um, I can't. I'm not going to speculate, but initial reports say there was something wrong with the arresting the aircraft from the flight deck. In either case, I think all pilots and aircrew made that out of there okay because they got picked up by Navy helicopters.
Nice.
That's very good. Well, we're going to take a quick break, real quick, and then we're going to come back to you guys and dive down into Commander Yates' responsibilities now. So stay tuned, and we'll hear back from you shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mind Muscle Mission podcast. We're here with Commander Yates with the Naval Talent Acquisition Group in Nashville. Welcome back, sir. How's it going?
Hey, going great.
Yes. Let's dive into your job now. You know, we spent the beginning of the episode talking about your past and all the amazing things that you've done and the responsibilities that you've had, but I'd almost argue that now you have a different responsibility, but a much more powerful responsibility of, being in the seat you're in, and getting, young kids these days into the Navy. So I think that's a tremendous responsibility, but a definitely rewarding one as well.
Certainly, and thanks for asking. Right, I'm the executive officer of Navy Talent Acquisition Group Nashville, which is responsible for all of the recruitment, officer and enlisted, both for a pretty wide swath of the country. It's about 138,000 square miles across 7 states, and encompasses all of Arkansas and all of Tennessee. Plus snippets of the surrounding area. The goal here, obviously, is to get the most talented, physically, mentally, and morally qualified young people, primarily, to join the Navy. Increasingly, over the years, less and less of the population has been qualified without any kind of special circumstance or waiver to join the military, period. And that's not to say the standard of young person has dropped these days, but I think it's more of a condition that everything that we do now is recorded, and I don't want to say public domain, but searchable, your medical record, any kind of history that you have with law enforcement or a traffic ticket, or hey, I had asthma when I was 6. Like that is recorded forever somewhere now, more so now than it's ever been. So it's difficult to find folks that are mentally, morally, and physically qualified, but also have a propensity to join the military. And then once you find those folks, you've got to kind of tell them why the Navy is the better branch, and kind of lay out the options for them, and over to them on what they want to do. It's important. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to kind of go back into how I never really thought of it that way. Everything's recorded now. And, whether or not you made some foolish mistakes as a child or teenager, would you almost argue that it's harder to get in nowadays than when we were joining?
Harder in what sense?
As in I guess there's more waivers that needs to be. I mean, there's a waiver for everything.
Okay, yeah,
we all know that. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
You. So people will get what we're trying to work through right now is people will sometimes get frustrated on waiting on paperwork or medical or whatever it is they're waiting on, and it'll be months. Um, because everything's in the system, our admiral had remarked about a year ago that he was frustrated because you've got let's say a high school football player that you got a guy or a gal that had a torn ACL when they were 6 years old, and then they went on to go play varsity football, and they're all state wrestling or all state soccer, and then they go to enlist in the Navy, and the DoD requires documentation for this torn ACL from 15 years ago, and the common sense answer is I know their ACL's fine. They were the leader in yards as a running back in their district for 3 years running. But it gets hung up because it's in a system somewhere and needs to be validated and verified. Similar to asthma, right? Like, don't tell anybody, but I was told when I was 6 that I had asthma. What my family did was nothing about it. So when I went to join the military, like, have you had asthma? And I was like, nope, because I didn't think I had asthma. And even if I had remembered, like, it was 20 years prior, 15 years prior. Nowadays, that will hold you up. So what we've endeavored to do in the last, in recent memory is try to take a common sense approach to some of these things that require waivers and speed up that process. Just because I think you're right. It is harder to join because everything is recorded. I mean, think about dumb stuff that you did when you were 15. Well, now people do stuff when they're 15, and it's and now it's like broadcast on X or Instagram, in eternity, and it's a real shame. There's something to be said for having a good time privately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree with
I truly remember. I remember like when I was enlisting, it was like, okay, they're not going to pull medical records. So if you got anything, ADHD, asthma, whatever, just don't say anything, and 99% chance it's not going to pop up. But I saw that in the last 5 years, they can start pulling medical records. They can pull basically anything that they want, and you'll be found. Truthfully.
Yeah, and honestly, they should pull everything that they have access to. But I think we should use a common sense approach. Everybody knows that if you get, I think it's pretty common sense that if you have a random doctor 20 years ago say that you had asthma, that shouldn't affect you 20 years later after you've been playing sports or you do water polo or you run 15 miles a week. It just needs to be proven somewhere so that we can tell you for sure that we're not making a mistake or ruining your health.
Yeah, I like that. I like the common sense approach. That's oftentimes not the first approach, but it should be sometimes regarding the fact of individuals getting in. I think I would definitely, looking back when I was enlisted, joined. It was 3 weeks and I was out, right? And it was a very quick turnaround and waiting months. Of probably just the ambiguity of not knowing what's going to happen can wear on someone, right? So I definitely see that it's being frustrating, and as in your office, they probably have to consistently be in contact, consistently ensure that hey, the communication realm is like this. It's in the progress. This is where it's at. So it's just added a lot more paperwork. At a lot more different stages of that, enlistment going forward. So definitely I can see the frustration on it. What is and I've had some pretty in-depth conversations on this, at some point, a buddy of mine said that there's going to be some red sirens going off at the Pentagon with the recruiting and the retention. And I think it's not rocket science to see that our numbers are low. Whether or not we're recruiting enough individuals or retaining the individuals we want to retain. Do you see that, and then do you see it being as big of a problem as some of the people that I've talked to say that it is?
It's certainly a problem, right? If we don't maintain our recruiting posture and the amount of folks that we need to man the fleet, that easily translates to undermanned ships, undermanned squadrons, undermanned staffs, places that really need folks to be working in order to upkeep, maintain, train, equip our facilities and our weapon systems. To be quite honest, you'll recruiting right now is in an okay spot. I think we're going to make our goals for the year, and we made it last year. But retention is a separate issue I'm not involved in, but I agree with you there. I did read a report maybe a month ago, and I don't want to misquote numbers, but it had to do with a percentage of the Army contracts don't make it through their first enlistment before getting separated. It wasn't a joint. It wasn't an article about all the services. I imagine the Navy's not doing too much better, but I honestly don't know. And I couldn't point to why that would be. And I'm not in the Army, so I can't point to what the causes there would be. But certainly, right, the end state being like, hey, if we want to power project around the globe and be enforcers of the international world order, rules-based order, we need people to do that. You can't do that with an unmanned aerial vehicle. You can't do that with an unmanned surface vessel. People have to be involved in those decisions, and we need to be present. We can't do that if we can't maintain our equipment or deploy because we don't have enough manning. That is certainly important to me. Many of my friends and peers, like my year group, are currently the XOs and COs of, deploying squadrons on the seawall right now. And when I talk to them, it's they're hurting for qualified sailors to turn wrenches and fly and fight the aircraft, which means we didn't recruit enough people 6 years ago to be fully qualified now. And so when they call me and they tell me how much they're hurting, and like you say, hey brother, I need bodies. Like I can get you new folks. I can't get you fully trained and equipped folks because that's years of training and experience. But if we're serious about maintaining our ability to, power project and take care of matters globally, we need folks now so that they're trained, manned, and equipped for whatever comes in the future. The time to, remember post 9/11, the next day, everybody, it's called the rally around the flagpole effect. Everybody wanted to join up. Well, the time to join up was years prior, so we'd be ready to go on, September 12th. Getting a huge force ready in a few months is probably not the answer after a big event.
And I think that's the issue now is like you said, like that's perfect, is like the fact that we need bodies, but we need qualified bodies, and it takes time to train these individuals up. So I wish I had the golden answer, other than continue to adapt and pivot to our societal needs, but also staying true to what our Department of Defense is. It's a manning system that projects power and handles conflict. So that's well said. I didn't think about that.
Yes, and I was thinking too, probably a main issue, a big part or issue, if you want to call it that, is a lot of these, the Gen Z going into it, not saying everybody, but a lot of them have been told, just go do the best job that you can possibly get. So everybody wants to be analysts, everybody wants to be intel, everybody wants to do this, if I'm not going to say secret squirrel, but this high-end stuff, this 90 and above ASVAB score. It's like, no, dude, we need somebody to turn a wrench. You got to be okay with just doing that. Probably not getting that as much nowadays. And like you said, with it takes years to train people. You think back to World War II and stuff like that, when these guys were training for 3 or 4 years before they even got overseas to go deploy. I mean, it takes time.
To expand on that, right? World War II is a great example. Until very recently, I had a 1953 Willys. It was an M38A1 staff Jeep, right, from Korea. And, the manual that it came with was designed for a 17-year-old fresh out of high school. You'd open this manual up and it'd walk you through exactly what you got to do to fix X, Y, and Z. You could open up that hood, you push a pedal in the cab, and you could see exactly in the engine everything that it moved and turned. So there's probably a quicker turnaround on joining and then being at least a journeyman, able to do jobs for the military. We don't have that anymore. You look at a a Bradley or an H-60, a basic airframe. Like it's jet engines, it's digital, it's wire chasing, it's pretty advanced and technical stuff that we're asking, young men and women to do. And it's not just open up a manual and turn a wrench anymore. So that increases necessarily the level of training and qualifications that you have to receive in order to be effective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't think about that. Very complex.
and when we do get it, it's going to be amazing. Once we get all these guys and gals taught up, it's going to be fantastic. But it's just we're not to say we're in that hurting period, but we're in that hurting period while we're building back up post either COVID, post fall of Afghanistan, all of that goodness. We're in that weird lull in between of a peacetime force. Just
I think
there's
the
not
time's
a
now,
big push.
right? The time is now.
Yeah.
If you ever thought about, joining, there's a lull, right? And history doesn't lie, and conflict, will happen again. When, who knows? But at least you want to you want to train up, right? You want to be, have the skills to be able to be relevant and to be able to add value to whatever branch and whatever job you do. Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought too much about that. Um, but what about? I do have one thing, and we talked a little bit about this of debunking some of the negative, I guess, stigma around recruiters. And I know you can't probably talk about much about the other branches, but a lot of people I've talked to, they've always said that, recruiters aren't they'll act like your best friend. You'll never hear from them again after, and a lot of just bad stigma around that. And I think that's you want someone who wants to join, but also has a good experience throughout that process. And since you articulated earlier on of the process sometimes is more delayed than normal. What do you see, and then how do you kind of like debunk that the viewers know that the recruiters out there are not the enemy, right? Not someone who's just seeing their son or daughter as a piece of number or a statistic.
I would say, we as an enterprise, I think, try to give red carpet service to everybody that's interested in joining. I certainly, I've been on the Reddit boards. I don't respond, but I read them, and how folks will have a negative interaction with their recruiter, or they think they're only a number. I don't see it that way. Our recruiters frequently and commonly, their job basically is to get one person in the Navy a month. But you have guys and gals that will go out and get 4 or 5, 6 contracts in a month. And the ones that are really successful, they're not trying to sell you. They're not trying to make a number for some make-believe goal. Like they believe in changing somebody's life for the better. There are a lot of folks that we get off this, I'm going to be careful, they're not off the street, but like they're in a bad living situation, or they want to get out of their locale because they feel like they're going to get sucked into some pretty negative involvement, or they want to get out and see the world. Or I've had folks that they just want to do 4 years, get that post 9/11 GI Bill, and pay for college. Happy to provide that for them. You know what I mean? But in terms of having a negative interaction with a recruiter, I've had to answer a number of IGs, and more often than not, their family complains on their behalf because they're not telling their family the whole truth. And it's easier to point to one of our recruiters and say, like, well, that guy or gal lied to me, or they're dragging their feet. When the reality is, like, well, you popped positive for a drug, and we're waiting on you to have a clean drug and alcohol test. So I bet you didn't tell your parents that. I bet it's the recruiter's fault.
Yeah.
There's also, it's the customer service effect. If you are a cashier at, you name it, and you have 100 interactions, and 99% of those interactions are standard, that'll be $15.08. They pay you and they leave. Nobody's going to think twice about that. But that one customer that comes through and you say like, oh, so I don't have any change, they're going to go straight to Yelp or Instagram these days or Twitter, and they're going to complain as loud as they can that this cashier at this place is mistreated me. I would venture to bet the hundreds of thousands of active duty and reserve, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and what do we call Space Force? Guardians?
Guardians, yeah.
Are they really?
Yeah, sorry.
They're called the Guardians. I mean, that's kind of sick, though.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Pro tip, you're on Jeopardy. Anyway, I would venture to guess the hundreds of thousands of people. There's a very small percentage with a very negative idea or experience with recruiting. And I could be wrong, but I think it's more the customer service effect.
Well said. I love that. I think you're spot on, 100%. And a lot of people don't understand how life-changing joining the armed forces can be. And, whatever is your goal, your perceived goal at that moment is probably not what it really is going to turn into. You're going to change your life for the better, meet different people, get better, well-rounded, get skills that you would not get otherwise. So I think I'm a huge, component of if you come in and if you want to stay 4 years, great, but don't make that decision that second, right? Because that two, 3, or fourth year, something amazing can happen. You're like, what, this is my calling. This is what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future. So I think that you're spot on with the customer service effect, and yeah, thank you for saying that. That was I never really had a good comment back to people whenever they said or threw the recruiters underneath the bus. So I appreciate that.
I think there's a forcing function to some of that too. I've heard many times through the years that, well, my recruiter lied to me, and that I think is less able to happen now because of the internet and all of the data that's out there. Now, certainly there's probably omitting things about a certain job that are poor you didn't care for that much, but I think the majority of folks, like if they have an inkling that a recruiter is not being honest with them, you go to Google and 18 seconds later you've got the answer.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
very true. Yeah. So you're based out of Nashville. You touch all these different states. Primarily, obviously, Tennessee and Arkansas. And what are you guys doing in the community? What events are you guys showing up to? How are you guys reaching out to kind of let our community know what the Navy has to offer?
There's a lot of school presentations, and there's a lot of walking around and just trying to meet folks. But we do have some big ticket, big events that are kind of widely publicized coming up. I don't know when this will air, but like for example, CMA Fest, the Country Music Awards Festival in Nashville. It's every year. This year it's June 5th through June 8th, and we're gonna have a couple locations there. One kind of location is just going to be showing folks and telling folks about the Navy Spec War community. And the other location will be we call it the Strike Group. It's a big virtual reality setup with a few different venues to show you what it's like to land on an aircraft carrier, or go through boot camp. It's pretty neat.
Awesome.
So depending on when this airs, like please come by and say hi at least. But we do that annually. So if you miss this year, then we'll see you next year. There's also the Great Tennessee Air Show in Smyrna is coming up. It's same weekend as that, June 7th and 8th. We'll have a show of presence there to support the Blue Angels, who will also be flying that weekend, hopefully, if the weather's good. We'll be at the Tennessee Valley State Fair later in September, and anytime you see kind of a big fair, a big public event, you probably assume there'll be sailors there, and probably me too. We also have the Nashville Fit Expo coming up. That'll be a great event. We sponsor a number of kind of physical competitions in the Nashville area just because it interests us. I feel like if those are the in-shape people who are intelligent, kind of our target market.
Yeah. that event's gonna be pretty sick. I know Christian's obviously a big component of that, so that'll be awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
can't wait.
just a smidget. Just hey, as long as the Navy's there, that I'm happy with, and it's awesome. It's awesome that y'all have such a eye to get out there. I mean, and I'm not just saying y'all in general. I'm saying that y'all's recruiting station in general is so keen on getting out in the community and doing it. Because I've tried to contact the Army recruiter out here for a couple of events. Truly, I send messages and say, hey, I want to have you guys involved in this. You don't need to pay a dime. We just want you there. Red message, red message, red message. No call back, nothing. It's like I'm giving you the chance to get out here and talk and have fun. And
Legitimately, man, if yeah, get me out of the office. I'll be happy to show up to anything you want. I love talking to people, and it's important, right? Landlocked state, Tennessee, Missouri was a landlocked state. I didn't see any Navy there at all when I was in high school. So me joining was pretty much all on my own, my family's shoulders. So if we can get out to the local community and they just see a white uniform, or our Type 3 NWUs, and just remember, like, oh yeah, there's this other service that I just don't see except for the movies,
Yeah.
and better too. Just any kind of Navy awareness.
Good stuff.
Well, when I was over there for y'all's the award ceremony and dress white inspection, the entire time I just kept thinking to myself, don't quote Colonel Jessup from
I
Few Good Men.
I expected at this point.
I just don't. It's like I'm not gonna. I'm sitting there. It's like, oh, don't say it.
Don't
do
say
it.
the line. Don't say the line.
And hopefully, most everybody who's listening is like chuckling along with themselves and be like, "Yep, I know what they're talking about." Well, yeah. Okay. So as we kind of wrap up, one of my favorite things we like to do is this little. Give us one of your favorite memories from your time in service. I mean, that could be good memory, bad memory, shocking, the whole nine. Just the immediate thing that kind of just pops into your noggin, like just a good time.
All right, this is a guy I keep bringing on my dad, but he's a big part of my life. My first deployment, I spent the first few months on this supply ship, the USNS Mount Rainier. And so we pulled into, for one of our many port calls, Subic Bay, which was this small base that has been shut down for a long time, or a little naval base. But in Vietnam, it was open. And during your R&R from the ship, if you were getting off Yankee Station, you'd go to Subic Bay, and you'd go to the QB Point O Club, and you'd have fun, and tear it up, right? Like whatever. So I'm in Subic Bay with my buddies from deployment. And I grab everybody and I take them to the VFW, because I just figure, and again, there's no naval presence there anymore. I just got lucky and pulled in. Take them to the VFW because I thought it would be cheap, and it was. But we walk in, and there's this old timer at the end of the bar. Like, this is not an announced trip or anything. He looks over at me and goes, "You Skip Yates's boy?" And I laugh like, "What? What's happening right now?" And that's my dad. And I go, "Yes, sir." He goes, "You look just like him." And he went back to drinking his beer. So obviously I'm like, okay, well, I go talk to this guy, and I was like, how do you know who my dad is? He was like, "Oh, I was one of your dad's crewmen in Vietnam." And, of course I want to talk to this guy. And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" He goes, "It's easy. We had R&R in 1968, and I never got back on the ship." I was like,
"Oh yeah."
I was like, "You expatriated?" And he goes, "No, I deserted." So the old boy here has been drinking in the VFW in Subic Bay after deserting, no names, but like 50 years ago. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Good for him.
Wow.
What a legend. What
a legend. I hope he's doing all right. This is a while ago. It's 2013.
That's what I love. They say it's a small world after all. I mean,
super small world.
Yeah,
Jeez. Pretty good story. That was one of the best ones we've heard.
That's a great one.
I'm dressed to impress, man.
Well, as we start to wrap up, is there anything like specifically upcoming in the next month, the next little bit that you want to kind of, I don't call shout out or anything along those lines? Any final words of advice, any of that goodness?
I don't know. Insofar as words of advice, right? If you've been thinking about the military, it doesn't hurt you to do some research. Go talk to a recruiter. I don't care if it's the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, Air Force is okay, and then Space Force if that's your thing. But just go ask questions. We literally cannot make you join the military, but if it's something it seems like you might want to do. I think there's a fair amount of veteran gatekeeping, right? When folks are like, oh, you didn't do 20 or you didn't do 30 or you didn't do X, Y, or Z. In my opinion, and I've always felt this way, like if you do one enlistment, you've done more for your country than 99% of America. And everybody should be grateful for that. I've had plenty of friends that did one tour, got out, and used whatever benefits, and they're successful in the outside world. But at least they can always say, like, "Hey, at one point in my life, I put myself in the position to be trained to do something great at a specific time, if called. And if you never put yourself in that position, it's never going to happen."
Well said.
That's absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. Well, awesome. Well, as we
That's
wrap up,
it.
thank you guys.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me on. I know it was a quick turnaround, but this is a good time. And if I come down and chat, I'll say hi, Ben. And
Yeah,
Christian,
please do.
please hit me up sometime.
Yeah, I'll be seeing y'all soon. As I know at least see you at Expo, and
Yep.
we'll go from there. Hopefully, get a beer or some of that in between. But everybody who's listening and watching, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Mind and Muscle Mission podcast. I'm Christian. That's Ben, and we are truly grateful, and we are signing out. We will see y'all next time.